afternoon, happy Monday, and happy Martin Luther King Jr. Day. Thought I'd shoot another one on gear ratios today because there are still a ton of people asking on Facebook and different forums, what gear ratio do I need in my F350 or F250? A lot of guys are jumping on the forums and telling everybody just get the 430, just get the 430. And there's nothing wrong with the 430, don't get me wrong. If you've got the 430 and you're not even towing or you're towing light, you know, you just have more gear than you need is all it comes down to. But hey, you know, what if you bought a heavier trailer in the future, right? You're set up for that heavier trailer. But something a lot of people don't think about, and I've actually seen somebody make this comment. They say if you've got the 430, you're putting less stress on your transmission. And that's not entirely accurate, because one of the other big comments you'll hear is, well, I've got the 430, so, you know, I can tow my 10,000 pound trailer in 10th gear. Well, that's not necessarily a good thing either. Granted, the transmissions of today are set up to pull in overdrive if you've got tow haul mode, and they will limit that gear if the truck doesn't see that it should be in that gear. You're relying on the software to do that for you. But, you know, back before all these tow haul modes and everything, in the 80s and early 90s, the rule was always you don't pull in overdrive. Now, there were different reasons for that, but one thing you need to understand is when you pull in overdrive, you're actually putting more strain on your transmission, not less. So if you've got that 430 and it's enabling you to pull in 10th gear, you're actually putting more stress on your transmission than a guy with a 373 that's pulling in 7th gear. 7th gear is a 1-to-1. So it's just kind of something to think about. I pull a 10,000 pound fifth wheel. It's 10,000 empty. I'm going to say probably running 12.5 with it fully loaded. So a 373 in my case is more than adequate, and I'm pulling 90% of the time in 7th gear, doing right around 25 to 2,800 RPM. So I'm, you know, letting the engine do some work. If I'm on a back road and I'm not bucking a headwind or going up and down hills, yeah, I can let things relax and I can get into 8th gear. Yeah, sorry about that. I had to take a little phone call, but I kind of lost my train of thought there, I guess. But we were talking about gear ratios and the fact that, you know, a 373, I'm pulling my 12,000 pounds worth of fifth wheel and cargo in 7th, and if I'm on flat ground, maybe on a back road or something where I'm not creating as much of my own headwind, you know, it'll get into 8th gear, and that's in tow haul mode and in drive. It's not going to get into 9th or 10th with the 373. Maybe on a downhill it might, but anyway, the point I was making was that if you're running a 430 gear, yes, your transmission is going to shift into 10th gear with a 10,000, 12,000 pound load behind you, and it'll pull all day in 10th gear. But one of the other things you hear a lot is people complaining on how warm these transmissions run, and, you know, they're complaining, well, my tranny's running hot. Well, what gear are you pulling in? Because if you're pulling in an overdrive gear, you're going to create more heat. If you're pulling in an overdrive gear and it's not staying in overdrive gear and it's constantly downshifting, you're going to create more heat. So in my case, if I'm pulling terrain where I'm, you know, up and down hills, I just lock it in 7th. You're not hurting things. I mean, this engine doesn't redline until 6,000 RPMs. You can work these engines and run them, you know, 3,000 RPMs for, you know, an extended period of time if you need to. 2,800 is about where I like to be or below for an extended period of time, but I would rather in that case run my engine a few more RPMs going down the road towing a load in 7th than lug the engine a little bit, run a lower RPM, and put that extra stress on my transmission. So just like I said, it's kind of something you don't think about necessarily. A lot of guys are like, well, I got the 430s, I can pull an overdrive. The 430 is a great gear, don't get me wrong. You can pull a lot of weight, but you take that same rule and apply it, you probably really don't want to be pulling an overdrive. So if you're pulling a ton of weight, then maybe you're pulling in 7th gear with that 430, you're going to be running even more RPMs than I am. But that 430 gear is there to help you manage that extra weight. Another thing is, people think you need that 430 to get moving off the line. We've been pulling these same size trailers for years with 373 gears. The big difference with this 10-speed is your 1st and 2nd gear are both lower than 1st gear was in like a 5-speed or a 4-speed transmission. So you've already got that additional torque coming off the line. What's interesting is, and I noticed this the other day, in fact, where I'm driving right now is extremely slippery. I could probably switch the camera on and show you this, and I might do that. But if you put your truck in 4-wheel low, you'll notice something. The first thing you'll notice is the truck starts out in 2nd gear. That's because 1st gear is so low, you wouldn't be in it for about a split second. It's going to shift. So 1st gear is really low in these 10 speeds. The next thing you'll notice, and not that most people would do this in 4 low, but if you drive and try to hit max speed or high gear, so to speak, in 4 low, you'll notice it doesn't shift past 7th. Why is that? Well, 4 low is inherently designed and intended for working. And they don't want you in an overdrive gear when you're working that hard. Now, granted, we're comparing 4 low and pulling extremely heavy loads to being in, high range and pulling a trailer, but so it's an extreme example, but it proves my point that you don't necessarily want to be in overdrive if you're working the truck. So, like I said, if you're a 430 guy and you've got them, I'm not trying to say 430s are wrong. I'm not trying to say you're wrong. And, everybody can drive their truck however they please. But there's a lot of people out there that are misinformed because there's too many guys with 430s jumping on, these forums and posts saying, hey, just get the 430, you can do anything. Yeah, you can, but it's not necessarily the best answer. I had ordered 430s originally. If you've watched my other video, I changed my mind. I bought a truck that had 373's in it while I was waiting for my truck to come in, and I drove it and I towed with it, and I'm like, I don't need the 430. The 373 is great. I would rather have my truck, I'm going to drive my truck as a daily driver on rare occasions, okay? I don't typically drive my truck back and forth to work. I drive it for hunting, fishing, towing my 5th wheel, and when I need a truck to haul something. But where I live, for me to get to, your box store, your Lowe's, your Home Depot, I'm hitting the highway. We also, when we are on vacation, after we've reached our destination with our trailer, we're going to drive around. And at that point, I'm using the truck like a car. So personally, I would rather have that 373 gear and run a lower gear when I'm towing, and then when I'm not towing, have some higher gears to take advantage of to not have to run, as high a RPM. And the other thing the 430 does, and this is again one of those things people complain about with the 10-speed, is they're shifty. They shift a lot. Yep, they do. There's 10 gears there. It's going to shift a lot. Well, this transmission wants nothing more than to be in 10th gear as quickly as it can get there. Well, if you put a 430 in a truck that you're going to daily drive, and now I'm not talking about tremors. Tremors are a completely different story because they run a bigger tire. And so if you take my truck with a 373 and compare it to a tremor with a 430, with the 35s, that's going to drop your gear ratio down to probably closer to a 410 maybe. But if you were to take this exact same truck and put a 430 in it, now you're making a little bit bigger difference. So, apples for apples comparison here, a non-tremor running a 430 with the stock 32, 33 inch tire, whatever it is, and in a 10 speed, you're going to rev out in each gear faster with a 430, and it's going to make the transmission feel more shifty. So if you're one of those people that's complaining about drivability and you went out and bought 430s and you didn't need them, that's part of your problem. So I'm not trying to rant. There's just a lot of people that jump on these forums and tell everybody to buy the 430, buy the 430. There's plenty of these trucks out there in 3/4 ton configurations with 355s that are pulling 10,000 pound trailers just fine. So don't feel like you can't, maybe you're buying a used truck or you're buying something off the lot. Don't feel like you aren't going to be able to use your truck to do what you want to do if you can't get a 430 gear. There's nothing wrong. I'm not a huge fan of the 355. I would prefer the 373, but the 373 it's like a Swiss Army knife. It's good at a lot of things. It's not the best at anything, but it's right down the middle of the road, and it just makes it a great compromise. So anyway, I'll try and get you some footage here of the 4-low example I just gave you here in just a minute and show you that, just so you can kind of see it. I don't know what made me think to do it. I was out with my kid the other day and we put it in 4-low. That's another thing. If you're not using 4-low at all, you should be. You absolutely should be. I try to do it every time I change my oil. Go find a gravel road. Don't do it on dry pavement, but find a gravel road, put it in 4-low, and drive it a 1/4 mile or so. A lot of people don't realize that there are parts of that transfer case that never get any oil if you don't engage them. So if you don't ever use 4-low, there's gears and shafts that aren't getting oiled. So you need to use 4-low and exercise that once in a while. Or you'll end up being one of those guys that goes to finally use 4-low, and when you do, it either won't go into 4-low or you'll get it in and it won't come out. So that's enough. I'll get off my soapbox on that, but I'll switch the camera around here in just a second, and I will get you that footage and show you what the transmission does when it's shifting in 4-low. Okay, so we are stopped. We're going to go to neutral. Come over here, and we're going to go 4-low. Shift in progress. Track control off. And there we go. So we're in drive. If you look right there, you'll see we're in 2nd gear. So we're on a gravel road. I'm going to get you up and over the steering wheel here. Try to hold this camera as still as I can. Like 7th gear. Our tachometer's climbing. We're almost at 3,000 RPMs. It would have shifted by now if it was going to shift. There we are. We're still in 7th gear. So you can see right there, they've got 4-low limited. You don't use 1st. You don't go any higher than 7th. I just found that kind of interesting, and the more I thought about it, it's like, well, that kind of somewhat proves the point a little bit about, why pulling in overdrive isn't necessarily a good thing. So we're gonna go back to too high here. And I don't know about you guys, you can leave it in the comments if you want, but when I'm shifting my transfer case, I prefer to be stopped and in neutral. I know these are, electronic shift on the fly, but man, I just don't like it. I don't like it. It's clunky. I prefer to be stopped and let things engage before I put it back in gear. So just give you a little shot out the window to see the weather we've got today. I will dangle one little carrot out there for you guys to try to get you to subscribe to the channel. I am hoping to do a video once the weather warms up and get out in the garage and do some work without my fingers freezing. I've got a little special trick I'm gonna do, a little hack with the 4-wheel drive on the truck. So I'm not gonna give you too many more details than that. You'll have to subscribe or come back to the channel to check it out later. But I do have a little something, a little teaser there for you to get you to come back and view the channel again. So thanks for watching. Have a great day.